Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR, and we have got a lot going on in the Big Ten news sphere. Not a whole lot of ball being played, obviously. Bowl season is over. Michigan are the national champs. Yes, that did pay me to say a little bit, but I feel like Ohio State's having a really good offseason. So, that's how I will deal with all of that going on. Of course, I have with me again this month Justin Adams from the voice of college football, all that stuff, the Big Ten show going on over there for Nebraska, and our special guest, Jeffrey the Greek from the Eyes on Big podcast. I'm going to let these guys introduce themselves, tell you where you can find them at. Justin, why don't you hit us off?
Yeah, so you can find, like you said, I'm over at the Nebraska football at the Voice of College Football. You can find us over there if you're a Husker fan. We got everything you need there. If you're just a fan of Big Ten in general or teams of the Big Ten and want more of a Big Ten angle, kind of very similar to this kind of structure. We do video recordings though, as opposed to live streams for the most part. And, so you can go on there and see if we do a little bit on each team breaking news, and we have some team previews and good off-season content coming. So
Yeah, for sure. Justin does great work over there with our guy Sonny. A little bit of a different thing, but they still cover a lot of the same content. But I love the way they cover it too. Kind of go at it different ways. We're all Big Ten guys here, and I think the more Big Ten media we have, the better. So go check out Justin there. Jeffrey, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell people where they can find you at.
Yep, I am Jeffrey the Greek on Twitter. Look me up. I typically follow back unless you're crazy. And then the podcast is the Eyes on Big podcast. Been around for, I think, 6 years now. We focus on, well, it's always been all 14 teams, but very soon going to be all 18 teams. So we try to break it up as equally as we can. I got the Iowa logo by my name, here. Definitely an Iowa fan, but I try to follow every one of these teams as much as I can. Jordan was my JW Eggleston on Twitter. He was my co-host this year. I think you've had him on a couple different times. Michigan fan, so that worked out perfectly for him. He was on all season and got to break down 15 consecutive wins all the way to the national championship. So good for him. And then my typical co-host, Big Kurt. He'll be back on every now and then, as kind of schedule permits. He's the OG along with me for the podcast. So come on in. We have a ton of fun on the podcast and on Twitter.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've had Kurt and Jordan on, and they're both great. Like I said, the more Big Ten media we have out there, the better. All different kind of shows here for you to enjoy. So speaking of the show, if you don't mind, please do like and subscribe. We appreciate that. And also, if you're listening on podcast, go ahead and subscribe over there. Leave us a rating and review. That also helps out the podcast as well. We greatly appreciate that. And also, we are brought to you by Big Banter Sports, bigbantersports.com. This podcast is brought to you by bigbantersports.com, where you can find a podcast for every team. Like I said, Big Ten media, want to get it out there, want to get it going as much as we possibly can. Helps the conference, helps the fan bases, brings us together a little bit, even if fan bases hate each other. It's fine. We're together a little bit, so it works out.
yeah,
I say that with a Nebraska fan on one side, or Nebraska fan on one side, and an Iowa fan on the other side. So it's all good. It's all good.
You got us separated, so
Yeah,
be fine. We won't fight.
There we go. All right, let's get into our first topic.
Shout out to Scott in the comments, though. We got to go Big Red already. So.
Oh, did we? There we go.
Yeah.
I forgot to read them. GBR and Ocho also. Is that OC like? Or is he referencing the?
I don't know.
John Diadamos
might be referencing that over on might be the John Diadamo show over there on the Big Ten. I'll be on there next week.
Yeah,
next
John
Monday.
Does great work over there. We had him on last week, so great stuff. All right, let's get into our first topic. Ohio State has had a big offseason so far, the addition of Caleb Downs being one of the largest ones. Also, Will Howard, Seth McLaughlin from Alabama, Julian Sayin is another quarterback, but of course he's much younger than Will Howard, so he's probably more of a depth add. They've also added Quinshon Judkins, the star running back from Ole Miss. Many people are not only calling him the best transfer portal quarterback, but also the best running back in the nation, or at least one of them. So a lot of things going right for Ohio State. And in the midst of all of that, Ryan Day has done something he's never done before, which is hire somebody to be the offensive coordinator that he intends to give play calling over to. So we'll see if that is actually going to happen, but that has been what the rumor is that Bill O'Brien, the former Alabama offensive coordinator, Patriots offensive coordinator, Texans head coach, Penn State head coach, Georgia Tech dude. I'm probably missing something there, but he has a long list of many places that he's been. And honestly, it's just kind of crazy to see what's going on with Ohio State. Not only that, but they've also brought back many of their players that could have gone to the draft. Guys like Marvin Harrison Jr. and and Mike Hall moved on. But guys like JT Tuimoloau is coming back. Travion Henderson is coming back. Emeka Ibuka is coming back. So there's a lot of hype for these Ohio State Buckeyes right now. But Justin, I have to start with you. Of these additions, the Caleb Downs, Will Howard, guys like that I mentioned, which one of these additions or these moves do you think will be most impactful for the Buckeyes next season?
I think Caleb Downs. I think what Caleb Downs was able to do this year was absolutely absurd, and he's only going to get better and better. And just having a guy like him to kind of, be on that outside and really kind of lock that down is so big for the rest of the defense to be able to do their jobs individually and not have to make up slack, elsewhere. So just having a lockdown guy like that, first off, it's hard to find, having a big time safety out there and somebody who's going to, like I said, take pressure off of the rest of the guys, but he's very versatile in what he can do. And I'm curious to see how he develops because, it's hard to think of him being any better than he was last year, but I know Quinshon Judkins would be probably the easy choice, but Travion Henderson comes back, so that's going to be kind of I don't feel like the drop off if it was just Travion would be crazy. I know Quinshon Judkins makes it a two-headed monster that's going to be very, very difficult to stop. But I think Caleb Downs is going to make a huge impact immediately and in the future. And yeah, man, I can't understand how big it is to have a guy like him on the defense.
Yeah, especially filling the safety hole that they had. They were going to most likely be starting a true sophomore in that spot this coming season, or Sonny Styles, who looks to be growing into much more of a linebacker, kind of, playing closer to the defensive line type of body, so that might not have fit him as well with safety staying back there. So it's going to be interesting to see how he assimilates into that position. Jeffrey, what are your thoughts on the most impactful transfers for Ohio State next year?
Yeah, I mean, not to downplay Caleb Downs, pardon the pun, at all, because that's a great addition. But the defense was already going to be elite. It already was last year. So, if it's a Madden rating, it went from a 98 to a 99, or a 97 to a 98. So I don't know if it makes that big of a difference, but it's certainly, depth and again, it's a big deal. To me, the biggest addition is Bill O'Brien. And I guess a combination of Bill O'Brien and Will Howard. If you look at the games last year that were closer or they lost, which is Penn State, Michigan, and the bowl game. Now, I know the bowl game was, all sorts of craziness for who could actually play, but it was actually the offense, shockingly enough, that came up short for Ohio State to get to where they want to go. I think Bill O'Brien, from what I've heard, he's already walked in and made quite an impression on the other coaches, the offensive players. I think they needed a centralized voice that wasn't Ryan Day, as far as wide receiver coach. Oh my gosh, I'm having a brain fart here for Heartline. He's not a play caller. Okay. Like, he might help out with the play designs and input on the offense. So, that title was kind of title only. I don't think he was actually calling plays. Bill O'Brien is going to call plays. I was shocked to see, I guess I shouldn't be shocked, it's Twitter, but people upset that Bill O'Brien was the guy that was tabbed. I mean, what are you expecting to get out of, that's a great addition. Bill O'Brien knows what he's doing. I mean, he was good enough for Nick Saban very recently. I feel like he's going to do a good job. Now, it's going to be interesting to see how the quarterback shakes out. If I'm making predictions, I think Will Howard is the starter this year. I think the writing is on the wall for Brown and Aaron Nolan, because from what I've read, that with Julian saying that was the quarterback they wanted all along. Now that they got him back, I don't think that bodes well for Aaron Nolan. So my prediction is number one next year will be Will Howard. Number two will be Julian Sayin, with Kleinholtz kind of holding the happy to be here third guy place card, with the other two guys getting out of there. So there's my big Ohio State quarterback prediction right there. So how will Bill O'Brien fit initially Will Howard in, but then Julian Saint also in, is it a platoon thing? Kind of like we saw, sorry to use this, but with Michigan, 2 years ago, when they brought JJ McCarthy along. It's going to be interesting to see how that goes, but you need a strong voice in the room to lead the offense to do that. And there ain't nobody that's more confident in himself and has a strong voice than Bill O'Brien.
Yeah, for sure. And I was on an Ohio State podcast talking about some of the Bill O'Brien stuff, and I was even surprised that the host of the podcast himself said this was a disaster hire, that this was a bad hire, and he was not happy with it at all. The other guy was a little bit better on the hire, but he still wasn't exactly happy with it. And my question was, who did you want, right? I mean, sure, Joe Brady would be awesome. But Joe Brady has had a fantastic year with the Bills. I don't think that was happening unless Ohio State just really got the checkbook out there and was able to contend with some NFL offensive coordinator jobs. If you ask me, and Justin, I know that you have probably more experience with Bill Bryan than any of us, as he was
I'm going to play devil's
Texans.
advocate a little bit.
Okay, all right, go ahead. Before I get started, go ahead.
Just, Bill O'Brien, okay, the thing with him, and yes, I do have a large sour taste in my mouth because he ran the Texans into the ground, essentially. As the
GM, though.
Yeah, well, things weren't going great as a coach, and he was on his last leg there, and that's why they gave him the general manager role. They're like, here, we're going to let you handle everything, and that's going to be your sink or swim year. And so my thing about Bill O'Brien is, we look at his resume and the places he's been, and I get in this situation, right? Like he's a big name to get, especially as an OC with his experience. But what really has he done in recent years that gets people excited about him? Alabama had, a good season last year, but somewhat in terms of like their offense, it wasn't necessarily as prolific as in years past. So what has he really done? Penn State, he was known as kind of known as this quarterback guru, but he really hasn't done much to develop any quarterbacks in recent memory. And I don't really know what's on his resume recently that really gets people extremely excited about Bill O'Brien.
Jeffrey, you look like you want to say something. What do you got?
I would say, look at the stats when he was at Alabama. The offense wasn't the problem. And then I would say,
but I don't think it was improved because of him. I think they just have talent. Go ahead. Sorry.
Sure. Well, they're going to have talent at Ohio State too. So we're in luck with Bill O'Brien. So he's going to be fine there.
I'm thinking of what he brings to them that, and besides 1 year at Alabama, what has he done in the lead up to that? Even
I thought he was great at Penn State. The situation, which is in the Big Ten, the situation that he took over in Penn State, I thought Penn State was going to crater horribly. They did not. I mean, it was incredible what he did at Penn State. Yeah, I mean, I think we're going all the way back to Christian Hackenberg stuff. Maybe Christian Hackenberg just wasn't good, So that very much could be what happened there. I mean, sometimes, you just can't mold the clay into what you want it to be. As far as the Texans, there were good times in the Texans for a while, and then things went off kilter for sure. But I don't know. It's just, you as a Nebraska fan better hope that you're not using NFL success and playing that into college, because I didn't think about that at all for Matt Rule, for how disastrous it was in Carolina, right? I look at what he did in his 2 college stints, which was very impressive, and how that applies way more at Nebraska than the Carolina Panthers. I would say the same thing about Bill O'Brien. So he was the head coach. Now he is just the offensive coordinator. Also, he has Ryan Day sitting there, who knows a thing or two about speaking, developing quarterbacks, and calling plays. So like the two of them together is something that you have to bring into this, yet letting Ryan Day take more of a CEO role, which he will do. But to think Ryan Day isn't going to have imprints on this offense and a say to help things out, we know that's not going to be the case.
And I agree. There's a reason I put the recent memory on there, because Penn State is what everybody points to. Even Texans fans, when he was coming over, is Penn State this, Penn State that. It's just, what has he done since? And just what he did at Alabama, like nothing really jumps off the page that he did, and nothing that he's done really in the lead up to that job has shown that he's really good at this thing, this one particular thing. Again, he was really much, known as the QB guru. That's what when he came over to the Texans, that's one of the things that was coined about him, is he's just this big, good, great with QBs. It is Sean Watson over there. And and I agree. The Penn State, what he did at Penn State was absolutely, tremendous. And again, I think a lot of this might be sour grapes from as a Texans fan, but was curious your thoughts on it, but just want to play devil's advocate there a little bit with the Bill O'Brien stuff. Overall, though, I don't think it negatively impacts Ohio State at all, but I guess I don't get the Bill O'Brien love as much.
I mean, I don't love the guy. I think he's a gigantic a-hole. Is everything that I've ever heard from him. So it's going to be interesting to see how that fits in with the staff. But something tells me him and Ryan Day have come to some sort of agreement with that type of stuff.
There were reports that he sabotaged the Texans there at the end to get out and get to New England. So
I think Bill O'Brien's number one thing is Bill O'Brien. That's for sure.
Yep.
Probably true. My highlights of things that I like about Bill O'Brien, and I'll just go through them because I've tried to have Twitter discussions, and I tried to have an intellectual discussion on Twitter a few times about
Good
this,
luck.
and that's always a terrible decision. But sue me, I had faith in Twitter for a second. But here's what I have to say. Okay, every single quarterback that Bill O'Brien worked with, you could argue they had their best season in their career under Bill O'Brien. Bryce Young had 2 years at Alabama. Yes, he's young. Yes, he just went into the NFL. But still, his 2 best seasons, he won a Heisman Trophy at Alabama. Matt McGloin at Penn State had his best season by far under Bill O'Brien at Penn State. Christian Hackenberg, as a freshman, had his best season of his career at Penn State. Again, as a freshman, had his best year under Bill O'Brien. Deshaun Watson was great under Bill O'Brien with the Browns. He has been horrible. Who?
Well, Deshaun Watson was great until he turned to POS,
but I'm saying, since he got to the Browns, I probably not horrible, and probably a little sour grapes there.
Some
but
things have happened since.
Yeah, he has not lived up to his contract. We can say that at the very least.
Yeah.
Brian Hoyer, he had a very good year under Brian Hoyer, or Brian Hoyer had a very good year under Bill O'Brien. Ryan Fitzpatrick, that was when he had some of his magic, not his, Fitz magic season or whatever, but some of his magic started to begin when he was under Bill O'Brien. Brock Osweiler, he turned him into a very competent quarterback. And then here's for a year. He was competent under Bill O'Brien for a year.
Yeah. I don't know if he turned him into one, maybe for one season, but yeah.
Well,
I get what you're saying. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yeah, for a year.
For a year. And then here I have some stats about Tom Brady. You ready for this? Okay. His year where he had Tom Brady in, 2011, right before he went to Penn State. He had 5,235 passing yards that year. That was the most Tom Brady ever had as the Patriots quarterback. 39 passing touchdowns, the most ever as a Patriots quarterback. 8.6 yards per attempt, his highest of his career. 13.1.
I'm gonna give a hard assist to Randy Moss here. I just want to say.
Yeah, I was about to say. Look at the receiver core. Look at the receiver core that year.
But was Bill O'Brien there?
It's true. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's like one of those things where it's like, hey, we almost got into a car crash, but did you get into a car crash? No, you didn't. And then finally, 327 yards per game, highest of his career. Yes, I understand Randy Moss was there, and that makes it a big impact. But that then leads into my next point, which is whenever Bill O'Brien has had a good wide receiver there, which I don't think anybody's arguing that Ohio State doesn't have good receivers, he has always done very well. Allen Robinson at Penn State, DeAndre Hopkins. They even had Andre Johnson for a year in 2014.
So he needs a receiver to be successful.
He needs somebody who can coach receivers. I don't think Bill O'Brien can coach receivers. I watch those Alabama receivers, and Holloman Wiggins was not doing good enough work, and Bill O'Brien sure wasn't either, because those receivers, I don't even think they knew what their routes were sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm being over exaggerated there. I legitimately don't know if they knew the timing in their routes sometimes when they were at Alabama. Go ahead, Justin.
No, I was just gonna say, like, yeah, I get that stuff, but to coin somebody a QB guru, right? Like, yeah, maybe he was successful in those situations, and each one of those situations is different, as we kind of pointed out with the New England situation with Randy Moss. But it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, he's had success and he's had offensive success, but to name somebody a QB guru, I feel like he needs to do more with these guys to set them up for long-term success. My opinion, in developing them as a QB, not only in just their offense, but as a quarterback mechanically and with reads and stuff like that. And so, another thing to look, I try to look forward to is sustained success after. But again, a lot of this could be sour grapes from the whole Houston Texans situation. I will admit there's unconscious bias here. And unconscious bias is something that I can't really pick up on. So, if it's there, I'm sorry, but there's a little bit there.
One thing I would add, every one of us, one thing I would add is what you would have to say about Bill O'Brien, even Justin, is that there has been a variety of offenses that he has run throughout his coaching tenure. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's going to come in handy this year, because although I believe it will be an Ohio State offense / Ryan Day, what I think is that the smart thing to do with quarterbacks that aren't at the level. I mean, we see what CJ Stroud, is. Okay. We don't have a CJ Stroud on this roster right now. Maybe Julian Sayin gets there someday. Okay. But right now we don't have that. Run the ball. Don't turn it over. Rely on your defense. Hit, timely third down plays. That sounds like a Bill O'Brien type of offense to me. Yeah. Pop a big one every now and then. I don't know. I don't think it's going to be a drastically different looking offense next year, but I will. I don't know. JR, I'd ask you this. What I said on the podcast over and over again is that's what Ohio State should do last year. And it always seemed like Ryan Day got uncomfortable where he wanted to just open it up when I don't believe he should have. And the offense never knew what it was last year. I felt the identity was either lacking or it was there sometimes and then gone. Do you agree with that? And B, is that something that you think Bill O'Brien was brought in to fix, a solidified identity?
Yeah, I think number one, a lot of the identity issues came from the fact that Ryan Day runs an offense where his quarterback does literally everything. You've heard CJ Stroud, I know Justin has because he probably listens to CJ Stroud talk about it, where he's like, hey, when I'm at the Texans, it's actually easier here because I'm not asked to do as much. I'm not asked to make every pre-snap read. I'm not asked to do all. And I just don't think Ryan Day, one, trusted Kyle McCord enough, and two, I think he was giving Kyle McCord too much at times.
Agree.
I don't think Kyle McCord is as bad as some people say. I don't think he's a bad quarterback. I just don't think he was the right fit for Ryan Day.
Sure.
If you go read some of my tweets, you might say, John, you were a little bit harsher on Kyle McCord than that. And I was a little bit, but we also lost to Michigan, and I have emotions. Sue me. But yeah, so I think number one, that, and then number two, I think Bill O'Brien does come in to give them a little bit more of that play calling and stuff like you've talked about, that he is able to take some of it off of Ryan Day. From everything we've heard is Ryan Day is still going to have his offense, which I appreciate because I think Ryan Day has a really good offense. But this is going to allow time for Bill O'Brien to work with the quarterbacks more one-on-one. This is purely speculation on my part. This is an opinion. I don't have any insider knowledge on this, but Ryan Day had a quarterbacks coach who didn't have a long history in Corey Dennis of being a quarterbacks coach. And so how much did Ryan Day also trust Corey Dennis working with these guys? I feel like bringing somebody in who's worked with quarterbacks for a long, long time, and like I said, has had success, at least with those quarterbacks in his system, to be able to work well, gives Ryan Day a little bit more ease to be able to go and work with the rest of the team, make relationships elsewhere, kind of like what Eli Drinkowitz was saying before the bowl game, where he was going on and on and on about how, a weight has been lifted off of his shoulders now that he's not play calling and doing all these things. So I do want to reiterate, I don't think that this is a great hire. I think this is a good hire.
Yeah.
I do think there were other guys who had been great, but I also think those were long shot hires to begin with.
I'll agree with that. I just want to play devil's advocate a little bit, but the experience can't be understated, like Jeffrey said. And then just having a guy that has that much NFL experience is a lot of recruits gravitate towards that. They like guys who've been in the league, know what it takes to get there. So,
yeah, exactly. So, all right, let's go through a few comments really fast, and then we'll move on to Iowa. We have Vols Fanatics here. Oh, look at that. An SEC show coming into the Big Ten. Thank you. Appreciate that. Hope you guys learned something about the Big Ten. Quality stuff right here. Appreciate that. Sonny, his tenure at Penn State was the best coaching job I've ever seen. I agree. I think it was.
I'd have to think.
Yeah, I don't know about ever, but it was a
maybe
very
he meant
good
at
coaching
Penn
job.
State.
Oh, maybe at Penn State. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Will Rogers staying at Washington per Pete Samel. That's huge. Good information there. Jim, you guys are missing the main thing Bill O'Brien brings to OSU: toughness and an edge that they desperately need. I agree. The toughness, I do think, is lacking on offense. I don't think the toughness is lacking on defense anymore. But I think that he will bring more toughness there on the offense. But Scott disagrees. He said, I don't see OSU lacking toughness. So again, on the defense, I don't see it lacking toughness on the defense. I can see some areas where it's lacking on the offense. I don't think the receivers block quite as much as maybe other receivers. But man, we could turn this into an Ohio State show really fast if we wanted to. But it's a Big Ten show. So
Lou Holtz said they don't have enough toughness. Lou Holtz thinks that.
I thought where Lou Holtz is right. Man, I was feeling so hype when that happened during that game or after that game. All right, Jeffrey, we have got Caden Proctor going to Iowa. I believe this is the only transfer portal pickup, at least the only one that I'm aware of, going on for Iowa right now. And then, of course, the Iowa offensive coordinator job is still open. Rumors were circulating that Paul Chryst was a candidate for a while. He has not taken the job. Joe Philbin was also a candidate for a while. He is a quality assistant or something like that over Ohio State, but he has also not taken the job. So I don't know if we're counting those guys out yet, but they don't seem to be rushing to take the job. Jeffrey, why don't you go ahead and just start on Caden Proctor a little bit. What does he bring to this Iowa offensive line?
Brings about 6'7" and 360 pounds. So that's a good place to start. I think what I typically take for the approach with recruits is, okay, we get the commitment first. Great. Let's get him signed first, right? Now let's get him on the campus. Let's see if he's actually good. Let's see if he can stay healthy. Like, this is typically my stance. It's hard for me to get super excited for recruits until I see it. Okay. It is a little bit different with Proctor because he's got a whole year under his belt at Alabama in the SEC. He struggled at first for sure, but I have read into how much improvement he showed throughout the year, last year, and then especially the last 4 or 5 games of the year, he really did well. Okay, so it is a safer bet that when he arrives on campus, he will be a very good left tackle. So that it doesn't just help left tackle; it really should help almost the entire line, at least 2 or 3 spots, because now we've got a tackle that should be playing guard, or our left tackle switching over to right tackle and then him kicking down to guard. It essentially picks up 1 or 2 spots, maybe even 3 on the offensive line to solidify it. So I believe that along with better schemes to help out the offensive line so that they're not getting attacked when seemingly the defenses have a pretty good idea on what the plays are that are coming up. So you switch things up with scheme. Suddenly you've got a twofold reason why the offensive line for Iowa should look better next year.
Well, you started talking about scheme. Do you want to hit on the offensive coordinator real fast? Your thoughts on Chryst, Philbin, and who the possible new guy coming in is?
Yeah, so like I said, I think I know who it is. I'm going to probably shy away from naming it right now, just do some really stupid hints at it. But I did think it was Joe Philbin at one point. And then all signs pointed to Paul Chryst. We will see someday if some of the details with that are let out on why that went down. It wasn't just as simple as Paul Chryst turned it down. He turned it down officially is how I think it went, but there was just a lot of things kind of happening behind the scenes there. So the next guy is going to be somebody that's going to check the marks. I believe the next guy is going to be somebody that will check the marks that I wanted, which is young-ish guy. Okay. Somebody from the college ranks and somebody that has a lot of experience with college quarterbacks. So if it is the guy that I believe it is, he will check those boxes, and he has tons of Power 5 experience. So not in the Big Ten, to give another hint, but if not Bill O'Brien, we will see if this guy, if it is him, if Justin gives him the quarterback guru stamp of approval. I can guarantee you he's more of a quarterback guru than Brian Ferentz was. Although a great offensive line coach, Brian Ferentz. So I believe the schemes will, I get nervous with making outlandish statements when it comes to the Iowa offense. I shockingly was hoping for the 99th ranked offense going into last year. How foolish that, the thought process was, but it should look different. Okay. There is going to be different schemes. For the most part, the blocking schemes for run the ball downhill were mostly fine. We switched from a lot of zone to a lot of pin and pull last year, and we saw a lot of success with that. But it's going to be limited with the schemes and quarterback that we were rolling out there for the throw game. I think we will see, an improvement on both sides, or on both quarterback and play calling with that.
Yeah, I think the offensive coordinator position under Kirk Ferentz is a special one, because Kirk Ferentz obviously has his way that he wants his team to be run, which has worked out for him. He's the longest tenured FBS coach, I think, active right now. So obviously he's been doing something right there. And it's not always a sexy offense. It's not always something that, is going to drop your mouth. But guess what? He made it to the Big Ten championship last year. I mean, the guy wins games, and he has a formula to do it. And sometimes you just have to think, if Kirk Ferentz is taking a while on this, he's obviously doing his homework, making sure not only he finds a good offensive mind, but one that is willing to work with him and make the right decisions. We have a comment here from Jim. He has a guess. Kevin Johns, formerly from Duke, will likely be the new OC, he believes. So
I swear Jim doesn't have a job. But this is the offensive coordinator that I was alluding to just now. So
wow, Jim, good guess there. So if that is Jim, we'll give you proper credit there, man. That's a great guess. And Jeffrey seems to
for the record, I've known this since this weekend, but I've had to sit on it because you protect sources, but it is not official, but that is the definite leader in the clubhouse right now.
Of course. Yeah. I've had people tell me information before too, and you never want to put those people's names out there, because if they're wrong, then everybody goes at them. Yep. Justin, we talked a lot about Caden Proctor and the offensive coordinator position, stuff like that. What are your overarching thoughts on Proctor and the offensive coordinator that could come in?
Yeah, I'll start with Proctor. Jeffrey is more in tune with the OC stuff than I am, so I'll let him kind of give his stamp on that. But with Caden Proctor, it was one of those things where it's a weird situation where he was recruited by Iowa, and then kind of the fans kind of turned on him, and then he's coming back. So like Jeffrey talked about, he's a mountain of a human being. That is the first thing you notice about him, is just a huge guy, a first round level talent. And to Jeffrey's point, looking over his PFF grades, he did play his best in the biggest moments. His overall grade 66.3, a better run blocker than he is a pass blocker, which will probably serve him well there. But, he developed his pass blocking, especially over the course of the season. His best game, believe it or not, was against Georgia in the SEC title game, where he had his overall grade normally is a 66.3, and his pass block grade's a 58. But against Georgia, 78.4 overall, 74.6 run block, 79.2 pass block. Actually, pass block much better in that game. And his best games were against Georgia, LSU, Tennessee, and Michigan was actually his 5th best game. And a game where the offensive line there didn't perform very well. And that was his 5th best game. And it was a solid game by him overall. So, Caden Proctor just fits, the type of 5-star recruit I see Iowa getting, this big offensive lineman to come in and just kind of set the tone in the battle of the trenches. And yeah, it's going to be a massive get for them. And, I think, over the course of his development in the middle of the season, and it's the thing is about offensive linemen is, they don't develop extremely quickly. So to see that over the course of the season was actually really impressive. And I think he'll take a big leap between last year and this coming year in Iowa. So.
Yeah. I mean,
if I can,
go ahead.
Yeah. If I can to just add on to what Justin said there, I think at one point, Brian Bulaga was the only starting left tackle as a true freshman at Iowa ever. That's somewhat recent, that's like 10, 12 years ago, something like that. Like that, the point I'm trying to make is it's rare, right? For a left tackle to start as a true freshman. So him to go down there to Alabama, which obviously, has been the career route for college football, very quickly start and they stuck with him, and maybe part of that was because the Alabama offensive line needed him to be there. It had kind of gotten beat up a little bit towards the end there. But I do think that says heavily that they believed in the talent, and then it showed out by the end of the year because you brought up a great point. It's tough. That is a tough position for young guys because it is so technical. I mean, it is so technical. Hand placement, feet, everything like that. Like it is drilled over and over. This is me looking from practice. I never played offensive line, to be clear. But so you're bringing up excellent points, and he seemed to get a lot better, plug and play. I always get nervous saying that, but he's about as close to plug and play for Iowa as you can get.
Agreed.
Yeah. And I mean, whenever you go into the SEC and do literally one of the most difficult things in college football, which in my mind is to start at tackle as a true freshman, like you said, there are just so many things that go into playing offensive line and, not just, having the technique and stuff like that, but having the feel for it and the speed at which guys are going. And I just look at it and I say, in Ohio State wanted the guy. And I say, if he went to Ohio State, he would have been the most impactful guy to go in to that transfer class for me, because this is a guy with experience that if you get a good left tackle, that can change your offensive line. You don't have to help as much with him. You don't have to chip block and do those some kind of things. You can leave a guy out there on an island, and it's almost as invaluable as a cornerback who you can leave out on an island consistently, especially with some of the best wide receivers out there as well. So, and I like the point you made, Justin. He did struggle a little bid more in pass blocking than he did run blocking, and one of the reasons he's a really good run blocker is because, man, he is a big boy. What'd you say, Jeffrey? 360, 350 or something like that?
6'7".
He's big.
Yep. Yeah, big guy, and he'll really be able to help out in that area. Justin, did you have any thoughts on who Iowa should be looking for in their offensive coordinator and Kirk Ferentz hiring one or anything like that before we move on?
Nothing crazy. I was just kind of like listening to some speculation on and some of the NFL guys. It just doesn't seem like it's going to be any of those. Some of the NFL names I'd heard: Brian Johnson, Frank Reich, Pete Carmichael. So, but don't necessarily. I was just kind of listening to some Iowa content, getting the feelers out and see what kind of they were saying. But not a ton of knowledge inside of it. But very, very interested to see, because naturally it's going to affect us in many ways. So,
and it's not official yet with the offensive coordinator. There's just kind of a leader in the house type of deal. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Phil Parker, defensive coordinator, LeVar Woods, special teams coach. These are the reasons why Iowa has had success the last 2-3 years. And when you and Jer, when you asked me earlier about lack of transfer portal activity, certainly not having the offensive coordinator is going to limit your ability to bring in offensive players. Okay, I mean, I think Caden Proctor was a little bit special with that. Maybe he had a little bit of knowledge on the offensive coordinator. Who knows? But what the NIL has already morphed into doing now, just a couple years into this thing, is retention of players coming back. That was what the Iowa coaches and Tyler Barnes did a great job with, along with Caden Proctor, was focusing on bringing guys back. And we don't have the entire defense back because, unfortunately, Cooper DeJean is going to take that NFL bag, a little bit too enticing for him. But outside of that, All-American, linebacker, almost our entire D-line except for one guy that was a super senior. So those guys got recruited back onto the roster to a defense that was extremely good last year. So that was what the focus was. Now you hopefully get the offensive coordinator into place. And wow, what would this look like if Iowa's defense and special teams looked a lot like it did? It has the last 5 years, but we actually have a competent offense. Color me excited that we might actually get to start figuring that out here next year.
Maybe one day. Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
Justin.
No, I was going to say maybe one day you can bring in a 5-star quarterback. I can say that now. I had to wait until this season to say that. I'm just kidding. Y'all beat us. No, you got Bragg. Go ahead, Jared.
No, I was just gonna say, one of the biggest things is Cade McNamara coming back. I mean, give all the credit in the world to Deacon Hill coming in and doing what he did. Obviously he won a good amount of games when he was a starter, but Cade McNamara, I mean, he's the type of guy that you want at Iowa. Doesn't turn the ball over a lot. He's not gonna try and make a bunch of super special plays because he's gonna understand that this is a defensive led team, this is a special teams led team, and as long as they bring in an offensive coordinator who is going to make sure that the offense does their job, doesn't turn the ball over too much, and is able to run the ball, that's the most important thing. And so if Kirk Ferentz can get this offensive coordinator hire right, I will be choosing them to finish over USC in the Big Ten because I firmly believe that Iowa is a better football program, has better coaching all around on their team than USC does. I think USC has a lot of hype and good for them, but they're also going to be in for a bit of a rude awakening when they come to the Big Ten because all these teams want to talk about Big Ten, West, whatever else, but
we'll see.
When you get knocked into it, it's a heavy load.
And as a side note to that, I heard that all but one guy in Washington's entire 2-deep offense is not on the roster starting this spring.
Oh my gosh.
They've either graduated, NIL. I mean, new coach, new everybody at Washington. I don't have a ton of faith in UCLA. So looking at you, Oregon.
Listen, that transition, Scott Frost came over from the Pac-12 and said the Big Ten was going to have to adjust to him. And, we saw Michigan, Washington, the top of the top from each play out. And so, yeah, it's going to be a rude awakening for, I think, a lot of these Pac-12 teams coming over.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's move on to the next one. Nebraska with some big coaching moves or a big coaching move and big time recruits and transfer portal guys coming in. Justin, I got you this shirt. I hope that you like it.
Let's go, baby.
Nebraska
That's like
off-season.
5-time off-season champions, if not more.
I've seen this shirt I've seen that shirt like 4 or 5 years in a row, and so I saw it and I was like, I gotta put it in there real fast.
It's been our rally cry for the last few years. We go into every off-season with excited. I do the best numbers on the channel in the off-season, so fun time.
That's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, so obviously the big additions are Glenn Thomas, the former assistant over with the Steelers, is now going to be the quarterback coach for Nebraska, and Dylan Raiola going to be coming in, and just a huge piece to that offense. 5-star, was formerly the #1 recruit in the country. He slipped a little bit, but I mean, this was still a guy who was awesome at Elite 11 and has put up really cool, good stats wherever he's been. In high school, he's been like 2 or 3 different locations. And just done really well wherever he's been. So, Justin, are there some more in-depth moves or anything you want to mention?
Yeah, and first off, not sure why Raiola slipped at all. I mean, he played a step up in talent in Buford, Georgia, and had 33 touchdowns to 1 interception. So,
Who knows?
But anyways, these recruiting services, you never know. But yeah, big time transfer class, not in terms of numbers, but in terms of immediate impact. The thing about Nebraska's numbers right now is we're way over. 85 is the limit. We're at about probably 105, 110, if not more. And so the way that they were going to have to navigate this class was going to be go get guys that have to come in and be instant impact in the transfer portal. And so more recently, they've been really, hammered down on that. Not only that, they've landed the main targets that they wanted to get. So coming off of last season, you're looking at, the offense as it was, and it was going to be hard to recruit skill position players to this team. Looking at that offense, it's not really inviting for guys who want to go to the league to come and play in this offense with the quarterback room that we had there. So they went out and first got a guy like, first on Dante Dowdle from Oregon, was a true freshman there, was a top 10 back in the 2023 class, average over 5 yards per carry there in a very small sample size. So going back to his high school film, though, and watching it, very physical at the point of attack. He's a big guy who can get in there and run the Satterfield style of play where he likes to get big, he likes to get physical and establish that run game and open up the deep pass, which is where Raiola comes in. And then also the receivers to open that up. What Nebraska really lacked last year was the deep ball, and Satterfield does like to use the deep ball in his offenses. And it was the quarterback ability to get that out there. Harbaugh didn't really have it. One of his biggest knocks his entire career has been his deep ball accuracy. Struggled there. So, and just didn't have the weapons. We're down to a lot of true freshman receivers. Malachi Coleman was a true freshman, was going to be our X until Jamal Banks. So what Isaiah Nair brings, he was at Wyoming and then, of course, was at Texas most recently. But Isaiah Nair had his best seasons at Wyoming, and he's just a playmaker. He's a guy who, he's a big body guy who can go up and get 50-50 balls. He's got good ball skills, but he's also very, very fast, 4.4 40, stretch the field, a lot of deep, touchdowns on his film. And what they did at Wyoming, like I said, they made it a point, and his coach mentioned this, to just get the ball in his hands as much as possible and let him cook. And so Isaiah Nair was a big guy to get, but we really still needed that X receiver. And that's why Jamal Banks, I think Jamal Banks cemented Isaiah Nair as a great pickup as opposed to good, because Isaiah Nair by himself, I feel like would have had to do too much and we wouldn't have been able to use his strengths. Whereas Jamal Banks can now come in and be that big body, X receiver. He's very physical at the point of, he goes up, he's aggressive at getting the ball at its high point. Maybe needs to refine some route running, but was the top receiver at Wake Forest. Wake Forest just didn't have a good offense, didn't have a good quarterback. So, it's two of those receivers that are going to come in and immediately be experienced guys that Dylan Raiola can throw the ball to. They're extremely talented guys, and they fit the under the radar type of guys that Matt Rule likes to go off. Isaiah Nair tore his ACL, and that's why he didn't really see the field in Texas. He was supposed to come in and compete with Xavier Worthy for the wide receiver 1 spot, but in spring got tore his ACL, and after that couldn't find his way in that talented receiver room in 2023. So only a roam reception of 14 yards. But, fully a year removed from the ACL, was a clean ACL tear, no other ligaments. So he should be 100% healthy and full go. And yeah, fits exactly what Rule's looking for. And then, Glenn Thomas, just another one of those guys that Rule likes to bring over that has connections to Rule. He was with him at Temple, with him at Baylor. More recently, he was with him in Pittsburgh. However, Pittsburgh, he wasn't a QB coach. Most people have, he was hired on here as a QB coach, co-OC, but he was an offensive analyst at Pittsburgh. So, and they didn't really have the talent there. So I feel like people are really knocking him based on that tenure at Pittsburgh and how that QB room played. Because a lot of people were set on Dana Holgorsen, which still might happen, but I have, mixed feelings about that. But Glenn Thomas, huge resume, worked with Matt Ryan. We'll go into a little bit of the JR style stats. Matt Ryan's highest completion percentage was when Glenn Thomas was his QB coach over there. And 2 of his 3 Pro Bowls came way Glenn Thomas was over there as his QB coach, and was let go when Dan Quinn took over. And that's when Rule brought him on. So really exciting stuff, man. He's been able to turn these offenses around. Really has worked a lot with Satterfield, worked a lot with Rule. So can bring a lot of the same messaging and it's just another one of those guys that Rule just likes to bring along with him that he trusts. So,
Yeah, I mean that's huge, and anybody who watched Nebraska last year saw the deficiencies of turnovers and things like that of the quarterback, and how much that stalled out the team because Nebraska had a really good defense last year,
Yep.
and they helped them out in a lot of ways. But it's really hard to play defense when your offense keeps giving the ball away. It wasn't just interceptions, but it was fumbles, and a lot of times too, not just by the running backs, but sometimes by the quarterbacks. Harbaugh was an electric runner, but just couldn't seem to hold on to the ball, throwing it or running with it,
Yep.
and that makes a big deal. So,
Yep.
Jeffrey, your thoughts on Nebraska addressing the QB coach by hiring Glenn Thomas? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, overall, I would say the two biggest offseason developments for Nebraska, obviously Raiola coming in. I mean, that's huge, and then Tony White staying too.
Yeah.
It didn't sound like it was a gigantic scare that he was going to take off. I think they got him for another year. Would be my guess. But huge. I mean, the work that he did with that Nebraska defense. Don't tell me coaching doesn't matter in the college ranks, because it does. Tony White is a perfect example of that. So then on the other side of the ball, you already kind of touched on it, JR, I mean, Nebraska ran the ball pretty well last year.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't throw the ball really, but the worst part was the turnovers that JR talked about. It has to be this year. It's just that looking from the outside, every year I'm told that this is the year that the turnovers are going to get fixed. Will we finally see it this year? I'm not saying I know if it'll happen or not. I do not know. I know that has to be number one, because we know that Dylan Raiola is very talented, but this entire quarterback room, as it's right now, is extremely young, or it's the guy that played last year that we don't really think is a quarterback. So you have to lean on the defense, get a little bit more from your special teams, and then just the fact that there are better players at the wide receiver position, we think, and then Dylan Raiola, but ease him into it. I don't think this is a Dylan Raiola show right from the get-go, unless he's that good. Okay, then it's step on the gas. Okay, typically speaking, even some of the best young quarterbacks need a little bit of time to acclimate to Big Ten defenses. So that's the story to me. How will that transition be? Keeping the turnovers down so that you can win games as you're learning with your quarterback. It's always interesting in the offseason for Nebraska, and coming in the season, this is no exception.
I agree. Trust me. I've drinking the off-season Kool-Aid every single year, and every single off-season I tell myself I'm not going to do it again, and I do. So that shirt was very fitting. And to your point, Jeffrey, yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, each year we think the turnovers are going to improve, and it was probably about the worst I've seen it in a long time last year. However, the only positive sign is I do think overall everything around this team that was negative has improved outside of the turnovers and the close losses. Everything that was brought over from the Scott Frost team in terms of the culture, the physicality, the way these guys play for each other, the closeness of the staff and the team. And I think, it's one of those things where turnovers are one of the things that can be, coached out of people, and our ball security can be coached to people. And I do think a lot of the turnovers this year were very mental by our quarterbacks too. I do think the quarterbacks, there was a lot of guessing going on with these quarterbacks, because I think they were just real tight and tense, because they knew that, their job was on the line every single game, because the quarterback room in Nebraska was so, they knew that there were the problem. And I think over the course of the season, that just started to get to them. You saw Heinrich Haarberg play a little bit more tense and not really go on his instincts like he did in the very beginning. And he's just not a good overall quarterback. He reminds me of a Taysom Hill type of guy. And like you said, we got Raiola on the roster, and outside of that, we got another 4-star in this class, Daniel Kalen, coming in. But that's really it. And I do think it's Raiola's job from the start. But I think the easy early schedule is really a blessing in disguise for us, because I think that gives him time to get in there and really, kind of get some of these reps, because the first 6 or 7 games are fairly favorable, should all be, very winnable games for Nebraska. And then the late slate gets a little bit, a lot bit more tough. So Yeah, I think the schedule might play to his benefit there, but it's one of those things where he's going to probably be the starter because there's no other really choice to get in there and win games right now, and be interesting to see for sure.
So Colorado, easy game then.
I'm going to that game. Well, we're gonna blow Colorado out, man. We ain't playing altitude this time. I'm bringing my watch. I don't wear a watch, but I'm gonna bring one anyways.
Jim,
hey, that's right, Jim.
Awesome guy here. Glenn Thomas will bring more toughness than Bill O'Brien and doesn't have a butt chin.
That's really what I don't like him. It's the butt chin.
Yeah, what's the hate for the butt chin, guys? All right, everybody's got a chin. Some people's looks like a butt. It is what it is. All right, great stuff there, guys. Let's go ahead and move on to our final topic. Reports indicate that Jim Harbaugh is leaving Michigan. I went ahead and just said Jim is leaving because today on Twitter I even saw Michigan fans just saying goodbye to him, and that seems to be the way that everything is happening. So if a week from now Jim is still not gone, I guess this video will be irrelevant. Who knows? I don't know. But it sure seems to be trending that way. Like I said, I even saw Michigan fans saying goodbye to Jim on Twitter, and I feel like once I start seeing that happen, it seems pretty doggone close that's going to happen. So he's in very close contract talks with the Chargers. The rumor right now is that he'll also be bringing Jesse Minter and Jay Harbaugh with him over to the Chargers to be the defensive coordinator and the special teams coordinator. There's also a rumor swirling out there that former Ravens offensive coordinator Greg Roman will be going there with him as well. Obviously, he would have known Greg Roman from his his brother John Harbaugh, who had him over with him at the Ravens. Jeffrey, let's start with you. Just open-ended question: What was your reaction to seeing that Jim Harbaugh is pretty close or already has left the Michigan for the Chargers?
Not surprised at all. I mean, we'd started hearing these rumors even before they won the national championship, so not a huge surprise. I was holding out a little bit of hope that he would stay. I like Jim Harbaugh. I'm not an Ohio State or Michigan State guy. Obviously, Ohio State, Michigan State hate Jim Harbaugh with a white hot intensity of 1,000 suns, and I support that. Right, that's rivalry. I just get a kick out of the guy. His press conferences crack me up. And I like his brand of football, right? It's defense. It's run the ball down your throat. It's been I wish it wasn't Michigan, to be honest with you, but I love the style of Big Ten football that got crammed right down everybody's throat, including Alabama in the SEC and then Washington in the championship game. So I like him. Not surprising at all. I think what's going to be the most interesting part of this is Michigan fans want Sherrone Moore to take over the reins. Is that what the Michigan brass wants? He's a pretty young dude, no head coaching experience. I don't think it's as much of a gimme as Michigan fans think it is. Also, mixed in with that and Sherrone Moore, if there are quote unquote sanctions that come down, okay, I personally believe there won't be. Okay, I've seen the ineptitude of the NCAA. I don't think anything will happen of this. I don't think anything should happen of this, just to tick JR off a little bit more. Okay.
You've done so. Great job.
Yep. I don't think anything will happen. But if there is some sort of fear that it could, then you can't have Sherrone Moore, who could, be a part of this. I would think the officials inside Michigan know how much of a connection he has. And if there is a connection, is there anything going on? I'm talking in circles, but this is what has to get figured out. If he's clean, I think he becomes more of a viable candidate. But even if he is clean, to just assume that he's the coach, I think, we're not quite there yet. And then the last thing I would add to that is, if it's not Sherrone Moore, the 30-day window opens up and we could see a lot of what we just saw happen at Alabama with guys going everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's a two-part conversation here, the reaction to Jim Harbaugh leaving, and then, could there be an Alabama or a Washington situation where there's just this huge exodus of players. And really, it's not fair right now, right? I mean, Alabama, as much as I love seeing their fans, kind of going through it because, they're one of the only fan bases that hasn't had to go through it ever since Nick Saban has got there. But, it's not fair that you are losing all of these players and everybody can just kind of pick and choose who they want, and you have no ability to go and get anybody else. Now, obviously, the spring window will be open, but that does limit who can you go get because of, the one-time transfer, unless you're a graduate from before, and people may have already transferred in the first window. So it's definitely not a situation that you want to be in. I'm curious to see if that will impact the Michigan administration, those kind of people, and there's decision making. It really seems like Jim Harbaugh set it up to be this way. But if some of those rumors are true, that the Michigan administration, athletic director, whoever it is, that the rumors are that they don't like Jim Harbaugh, do they go with Jim Harbaugh's wishes, or do they get a little stubborn and say, you know what? No, we get to choose the new ball coach. We're not going to let this guy who went off to the NFL choose the new ball coach here. We're going to go out and get Brian Kelly, or, I even heard somebody say PJ Fleck at one point. I don't think that would happen, but who knows? That's
that would be a mistake.
Name I heard. Yeah, that's what I think too.
Let's do it. Let's see how that happens.
He's going to row that boat right out to the middle of the ocean, lost at sea with Minnesota's boat out there.
Oh man,
he was our 13 and 14. I was the only one that had any faith. I think I have him 13. I think I was the only one that had a little.
No, I had him. Yeah, I had him last. Yeah. No. Actually, no. I put Purdue's coach last because Ryan Walsh, because I hate him more.
Yeah.
But he had a lot to say about Nebraska this leading up to our game this year. He don't like us.
Yeah, he did. Justin, your reaction to the news, and then just thoughts on Sherrone Moore, possible exodus, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, first things first with the Chargers news. They were kind of the front runners during the whole time. So I think I'm less surprised that it was the Chargers than even him going to the NFL. But like Jeffrey said, it was just kind of, written in the stars for a while now that he was going to the NFL. It's even before the season started, the last few off seasons. But I think the Chargers is a good fit. They got the 5th overall pick. They got a franchise quarterback. So he probably sees something there he can build with. And, the staff that he's looking, the names listed on the staff that he was looking to bring over are very good. But with Michigan, there's a little juxtaposed position here where they, we're talking about the brass and whether they want to, grant Harbaugh his wishes and Sherrone Moore. But I think whatever decision they make there, dude, I think if they stick with Sherrone Moore, then short term they're in a much better position. But if they go elsewhere, it's going to be a long process probably to turn that over and get it back. But the thing is that shakeup coming into this new Big Ten, it's even more interesting to see how these late coaching staff changes are going to play out and how these teams are going to get built back up in this, what seems to be arm race of the two super conferences now, because it's definitely going to look a little different or a lot different in terms of how that goes. So not only are we going to get to see, what they do next, but we're going to get to see the impact that a significant coaching change has. And if they have this mass exodus of roster turnover, just how hard it is to be able to build that back in this current college football world. So really interested to see, because I think that Sherrone Moore decision is going to be all the difference in how we view this Michigan team the next season or two. So I think Sherrone Moore, though, in terms of just for the ease of the transition and retaining a lot of the talent that they have, I think Sherrone Moore has, I think it makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think Sherrone Moore makes sense as well. Let's go through a couple comments here. Jim saying goodbye, Jim. Jim saying goodbye to Jim.
The other Jim.
Casual Big Ten. Greek, let's go. Glad you're here. Yes, we are too. Justin Rose, Greg Roman was Jim Harbaugh OC. Yes, actually he was. 11 to 14, I think, when he was and I think he was at Stanford with him too. I don't know. I'll have to go back and check on that. I think he was with Stanford, now that I think about that. And then Jim is also asking, how about David Shaw to Michigan?
That's interesting. Yeah.
You guys have any reaction
I
to
would be happier. I mean, I've heard, Notre Dame coach Kelly, no chance. Like that would be a horrible hire to me.
Yeah.
To go from a coach in Jim Harbaugh that I think had morphed into a really good players coach. I don't think he was always that way. I think he morphed into that. I think that's part of the reason why you saw the success that you've seen at Michigan. Then to bring in Kelly from Notre Dame, who is in the Bill O'Brien mode for a-hole, I think that would be a bad hire. I think David Shaw, I've seen that thrown out there, that would be open to it. I've heard, Matt Campbell, every time one of these big, coaching hires comes out, his name's out there. I don't think he's actually going to get hired, but I hope he's rumored because I have fun with that every single time. Outside of that, who knows? I think could they pull Dan Lanning over from Oregon? That's another name I've heard. Now I think Dan Lanning is. I think he should stay where he's at. I think he's got that Nike money and things are good. But the point you make is all of these names are on the board.
Yeah, they're all on the board. The problem with it is the timing, right? I mean, we saw this when Ohio State moved on from Jim Tressel in May. Obviously, this isn't as late as that, but the coaching carousel of hiring a head coach has kind of already surpassed us in a lot of ways. Even Arizona had to go out and hire the San Jose head coach to be their head coach. I'm not saying that's a bad hire, but normally you try to go with maybe somebody with a little bit more cachet or maybe been in the Power 5 for a little bit before you go out there and do that. So it sounds like I'm dogging that hire. I'm not dogging that hire. I'm just saying, that's kind of what can happen when you try to hire this late. I think Sherrone Moore gets the job if, all this comes to fruition and Jim Harbaugh's moving on. I think Sherrone Moore gets the job. Number one, I really think that the players in there believe in Sherrone Moore. They had, an amazing experience to bond with him those last 3 games of the season. Those guys who were there for that, I know a lot of guys are moving on, but, and Sherrone Moore, he liked to use Alex Orji in those situations where he could run the ball and stuff. So he already has a bit of a relationship with him and could move on from there and be an impact with him. But I think Sherrone Moore makes the most sense with the timing of it all. Now, if this was happening, like I said, mid-December or something like that, do I think the same thing would happen? No, I think they probably would open it up. But because of the fear of what happening to you, like happening to Alabama and Washington, and because of the timing of not having a whole lot of options at this time, I think you most likely see Sherrone Moore be the hire. Do you agree, Justin?
Yeah, I agree. And to Jeffrey's point where you mentioned Dan Lanning, I bet you Oregon fans are really sick of Dan Lanning's 37-year-old Dan Lanning's name being thrown out there for all these positions. They're probably a little anxious that he might be gone in the next couple seasons. But yeah, I agree. Sherrone Moore has got to be the guy, in my opinion. Everything lined up perfectly. He even got to coach some games for certain reasons, this season. And so, yeah, he's built such a good relationship with that team and those players. And just looking at how emotional he was in some of the press conferences or post games, you can tell how much he cares and loves that team. And I think the players pick up on that. So I think he's a guy that they want to play for. And hopefully the brass pick up on that because they aren't always in tune with what the players are wanting and thinking. So.
Yeah, I mean, don't get too caught up in the politics of it all, right?
Yeah.
If they don't like Jim Harbaugh, just make the right decision for the team. It doesn't matter if Jim Harbaugh was grooming this guy to be the head coach, or if you don't like Jim Harbaugh, just make the best decision for the team.
Don't ruin your own legacy for somebody who's gone.
Right. Exactly. So yeah. I guess this one just popped in my head. We'll discuss it really fast, and then we'll be done from here. But Michigan, I mean, you guys brought up Dan Lanning. I feel like Alabama's probably a better job than Michigan. So if Alabama couldn't get him, I don't think Michigan could. But maybe I'm biased. I know I'm a Buckeye fan, so I'm gonna look a little bit more down on them than maybe some other people. But I mean, is Michigan on the same tier, about the same job as Alabama? Is it worse? Is it better? I mean, Jeffrey, you have any thoughts on the position of head coach at Michigan? What kind of job it is compared to other schools?
If I'm taking the question comparing Michigan to Alabama, historically speaking, everybody looks up to Alabama. So yes, I put Michigan under Alabama, but following the GOAT,
yeah,
like they say, don't be the guy, be the guy that follows the guy. So like, if I'm looking at, Michigan or Alabama, I'd probably go to Michigan because
that's a good point.
Keeping those Alabama fans happy. I think Michigan fans, they're new to this national championship situation. I think most Michigan fans understand it took a 3-4 year build for them to get to the point where they can win the national championship. And they know 80% of the guys that were involved with that are gone now, right? So I think Michigan fans have a little bit more, context here to understand that they're probably not going to win the national championship again next year. Alabama fans think they're winning it again. They can't believe they haven't won it in 2-3 years, whatever it's been for them. So that plays into it to me. Maybe it played into it to Dan Lanning. I don't know.
That's a good point. I didn't think of that. What do you think, Justin?
Yeah, Jeffrey kind of took the words out of my mouth. It was one of those things where it's like you look at the programs, right? You can definitely probably put Alabama ahead of Michigan in recent years, but the coaching positions themselves, looking at from the outside looking in, if you're Dan Lanning from the Alabama position, like he said, he's kind of going out near the on top almost. It was a shock that he was, retiring and stuff like that. And then on the other end, you have Michigan with all these, this black cloud over him in regards to the scandal and stuff like that. And then also, following Jim Harbaugh, who, wasn't always beloved in Michigan, came on, in the last 3 years and really turned it up and became, somebody, last year, really most of the fan base joined on, but in the previous couple of years just started to kind of trend the right direction for Michigan. But it's not that long tenure of success that he'd have to follow up to the level of Saban. And it's one of those things where it's like the overall coaching and how people are going to look back on this, depends on the sanctions. And if Dan Lanning could come in and win with this Michigan team, and not have that black cloud over him, he could come out looking better than Harbaugh did. So it's one of those positions where Michigan, he can be seen as successful and maybe, be seen as an improvement compared to what they had. But in Alabama, you ain't doing that. So
yeah, never going to be better than the GOAT. That's for sure.
Yep.
So, all right. You guys got any more thoughts on Michigan or anything like that before we get out of here?
No, sir.
All right. Good deal. Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for coming on. And thank you so much, Justin, for coming on. Appreciate both of you guys. We will be back next Tuesday to talk more football. Sunday night, Wednesday night, reserved for basketball right now. So we will have a basketball episode tomorrow night. If you're into that kind of thing, if you're not, you're football only, check back in with us next Tuesday at 9 o'clock. There were some games going on tonight. We'll talk about those.
Did Ohio State play tonight?
They did, and they lost, and it was depressing. So,
okay. Just checking.
I have my emotions ready for the
Sorry,
episode.
JR.
All the people, it's become a thing. There are people who just genuinely like me being depressed about Ohio State basketball.
I'm a Nebraska fan. I don't want to hear depression about basketball.
Nebraska kicked our butt tonight.
We're the worst Division I program in history. 0-7 all time in the tournament. Okay.
Thank you. You've made me feel even better about getting blown out by Nebraska.
We're good this year.
Yeah.
We're good this year.
Lake Mass destroyed us. Anyway, if you want more depressing JR with his basketball takes about Ohio State, tune in tomorrow night at 9 o'clock. So thanks so much, guys, for coming on. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a great night.